Hello and welcome to the Digital Women Awards. It's been an exhilarating 7 year journey building this entire initiative with every single woman entrepreneur coming to the fore and saying, I want to start my small, big, medium sized business. It has also been extremely rewarding meeting so many women entrepreneurs across the country, whether it's Salem, Siliguri, Nasik, Nagpur, Ludhiana, Jalandhar, Bareilly, to many other places in the country. All these women have so many things in common, and one such very critical piece has been getting out of this pandemic with new lessons, lots more guts, and this belief that I've seen the worst and I can only get better. In that spirit, I've got Pooja Dhingra joining me. She is the founder of Lay 15 and one of our earliest winners of the Digital Women Awards. Pooja, thanks so much for joining us. So, Pooja, let's start with the pandemic. It's not been easy. It's been, nearly 2 years, and there's been a great deal of struggle. How have you come out of it?
Yeah, I mean, it's good to speak to you. Like I was saying, you were one of the first few people I spoke to last year in lockdown. We were just 2 weeks into lockdown and we had no idea what was happening. And I still remember talking to you and thinking in my head, what do I say to her? My world is falling apart. I want to go back and watch that video again. But no, I just, last year was tough for all of us, and I think for the F&B industry especially. And I think for me, at some point I just said, like, let me see what is the best opportunity in this crisis that I can find, put one foot in, ahead of the other and see where we land. And that's exactly what I've been doing. My mantra for all of last year was one day at a time, one day at a time. So anytime anyone asks me, like, what are your plans? I don't know. We're going to survive today and then we're going to see how tomorrow goes. So I think for me, it was just about finding this opportunity in the crisis. And it also gave me a time to start baking again for myself. And through that journey, I just kind of rediscovered, because I was asking myself all these hard questions, right? I think we all were. What are we doing with our lives? Is this what we want to do? Is this the right? If I don't have this, what do I have, etc., etc. So yeah, I think that just led to coming home.
So, in a way, the pandemic also gave a lot of us to think about what can we get rid of, what is not working. Taking some of those tough decisions, how did you go about deciding what needs to stay, what needs to go?
I think when I shut the cafe, the first thing I just, everyone talks about, oh, this is this great brand and people love it and etc. And when you're on the day to day, you don't really realize what kind of impact you really have. But I think when we shut the cafe, for me, that impact of how much love everyone had for Love 15, it was quite heartwarming and kind of gave me the courage that, okay, no matter what format we do what we do it in, it doesn't have to be necessarily a cafe in Colaba, it can be a hot chocolate in a box. But the fact that people are so emotionally connected to it is, something that I feel is it's taken me 11 years to build, and I think that that is something that I could leverage in any format. So I think for me, that realization of, acha, this is shutting down, but just look at how much people love it, they want it, and I think that's something really special, and not, I feel privileged that I've managed to build this over the last decade or so.
When it comes to keeping an eye on day to day things, an entrepreneur sometimes loses sight of the big picture. What is the next big thing I want to do? Tell us, how do you do it as Pooja? When do you spend time in a week? How do you structure your weeks? I think it'll be really useful for everyone.
I think that, there are so many distractions on a day to day. And when you're a solo founder, when you have a large team, you're always fighting fires. It's tough to kind of, you can't build and fly that plane at the same time. So what I've done since is that, I set specific time every week to just focus on future and scale. So no matter what happens, Friday and Saturday of every week, we have a scale team, and that's all we're talking about is the future. And then the day-to-day is for that is off my plate for those 2 days. And I think it's important to kind of incorporate it in your like regular schedule, because otherwise it just becomes like this far off thinking, ha, ye ek saal mein ye karenge, but how will you get there? So it's important to get it in your weekly schedule.
I've seen that during the pandemic, you were out with your packaged foods business. How did that experiment work out for you? Now it's been what, like close to a year or so?
Yeah. So, we built out our kitchen that I'm out of today, for this kind of scale. So our back end is quite sorted where production, etc. is concerned. So that wasn't an issue. Figuring out the supply chain, figuring out logistics, all of that kind of took a little bit of time. But the response was just so overwhelming, especially like when we launched our hot chocolate. I had a certain number in mind that this is what we'll sell. And it just kind of blew my mind as to, and the orders were coming from from Varanasi and the Andamans. And I was like, wow, I would never think these people have never, and that's really goes back to the whole digital experience of a brand, right? Because they've never been to Love 15 in Mumbai, they've never tried the products, but they've seen this brand story, they've been through my journey, they know my struggles. So the minute they could have access to a product, they wanted it. And to me that was key, and I think that's what kind of sets us apart. From a just figuring out getting a whole R&D team, a quality team, now changing my mindset as a pastry chef, and who's used to working with everything that's to be consumed in one day, to now making products that have to last 6 months on shelf. I think that was the biggest challenge for me, in the day-to-day application.
Let's talk about another issue that a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, which is building the right kind of team. How have you divided your team structure? And, who's going to lead your new business? Who's going to lead your marketing otherwise? Who's going to do the operations? And then, of course, all the challenges that come with people leaving and going and so on. Talk to us a bit about teams.
To be very honest, for the last like 8 9 years, it was quite like chaotic. And I think for me personally as well, it's not something that I'm trained in, right? Like I'm a chef, and yes, I did have some business in school, but no one can really train you for this on ground, how do you set up your HR policies, and how do you do this,
Yeah.
and how do you do that. So for me, really working with a team of consultants who I was like, I don't know this, and there's no like shame in admitting that I don't know how this should work, but I'm here to learn, and I'm working with you because you are an expert in this. So it's been quite interesting, because I got a supply chain consultant, I got like an R&D consultant, I got an HR consultant, I got a leadership coach, and I was like, I'm going to give myself all these tools that are available that I can use, because expecting me to always know everything, and that's the biggest downfall, right, with any entrepreneur, because you're in that space where everyone thinks that you have all the answers, and at some point you're like, I don't.
So, Pooja, you've been a Digital Women Awards recipient early in our journey. You also joined hands with us several times to mentor many other women, both in your sector and otherwise. Why do you think, despite all the efforts that entrepreneurs go and put out there, we have such a huge stigma around failure? And why are we not able to get rid of that concern? That thing at the back of our head, I have to succeed, I have to succeed, I have to succeed. What if you fail? It should be okay to fail.
So I think that you're absolutely right, and I feel like for me, I look at failure as just something that's pointing me in the right direction. So I say celebrate it, right? So if you're not, if you, it's not like the final destination. If you fail at something, just what are your learnings from it? This whole operating from a fear, and I used to do that a lot. I used to operate from a lot of fear, which I think that that's one of the biggest things that COVID also changed in me, is that you really have no control. Like you can do everything right, and then there can be like a pandemic that you have no control over. So there's no point worrying about things you can't control, and a lot of the failures are things that sometimes are out of our control, right? So for me, it's always about, and this sentence truly helped me um, make it through last year, which was find the opportunity in the crisis. And I think that every failure is a crisis. And I think that if you embrace it and say, what are my learnings from it? Can I do something differently? Can I celebrate it? Can I be vulnerable and vocal about this? And I think the minute you embrace that and say, I'm not this superhero, I don't know everything, I make mistakes, but I'm here to get better and I'm here to learn from it, I think everything switches.
Yeah. So, Pooja, I'm going to actually take a step back and ask you very fundamental questions, because I think every time women entrepreneurs come to Digital Women Awards, their one clear expectation is, and I don't want to ever disappoint them, is that we want to know the tools of the trade. What does it take to become an entrepreneur in terms of fixing certain things that become an enabler for your journey? And there lie digital tools, which both you and I have been huge beneficiaries of. Talk to me about what tools have you used in this journey?
I mean, from a marketing perspective, obviously it was, the social media channels. So, I always say that the phone was always an extension of my hand. and I was in the kitchen, and at that point, 11 years ago, I would post things on Facebook, and then that would lead to discovery. So I didn't really have like, any knowledge of how marketing would work, but I knew that word of mouth and people, when they see something, they want to eat it, etc. So I think that was key for me in the initial years. Whether it was figuring out my voice on Instagram, or understanding how YouTube works, or Twitter, and just understanding that how they're also different, and what you can do, and how it's not the same as you make one thing and just post it everywhere, but really build relationships. I think that building that community and relationships through different platforms, um, and then that compounds over the years, right? So I think that truly helped. And then, I mean, these other tools, like there are like professional tools that we've got onto like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, which is like Slack or Asana or things like that, just as an entrepreneur, that helped me and my team. So they're just like, something that, as simple as we said, we're not going to use WhatsApp for work. Like this is, let's just kind of move to Slack. And it was difficult, but now everything is so organized, and it's so structured, and the way we function as an organization is so different thanks to that.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I completely agree with you. Let me just ask you my one final question. And this again is keeping an eye on the trends around us. I mean, the videos are getting bigger and bigger in terms of the fact that they take up a majority of our time spent, but their length is becoming shorter and shorter. Just interested to know how you feel about video as a medium. What are you doing about it? How are you, for example, running your YouTube channel, also baking X number of cakes, getting deliveries out, getting the factory to work? So how do you sort of get all of that in control when you think of your video strategy, for example, which, by the way, is phenomenal?
So for me, I'm just, as also this person who's not comfortable at looking at herself, and let's not get into all those issues. Video has actually been quite challenging. So I prefer being behind the camera. I prefer like shooting things, which is why Instagram was great, because it was pictures of my food. I loved it. And then slowly I was like, okay, now I have to, okay, pictures of me, that's fine. But then the video started, and it really took me some time to embrace it. So it's not something that comes easily. It's not something that's like effortless. It takes a lot of like, okay, I have to put myself out there, and I have to do this. So if anyone's watching this and they think like, oh, it's a piece of cake, it's not. It's challenging. And just last year, in the lockdown, I started my YouTube channel just with the intention of, okay, I don't want this to be a simple just recipe kind of channel. I want to have conversations. But the problem again with being an entrepreneur and having 10,000 things on your plate is that what do you give priority to, right? So now I've decided to outsource everything that I can. So I'm actually working with a company who's going to help me build my YouTube channel, which is we're going to start now. So let's see how that goes.
Pooja Dhingra, thanks so much for joining us. Always a pleasure. And thanks so much for being so specific in your answers when it comes to the Digital Women Awards sessions, because this is what women are here for, to know how do they get it done.